issues, and the topic is new forms of investment, and we have really good guests, and I'm starting with Timo Ritakallio, who has worked as a president and group executive chairman at OP Financial Group from March 2018, and before that Timo actually worked at Ilmarinen, a mutual pension fund, pension insurance company, as president and chief executive officer since 2015. So welcome, Timo. And then we have Jyrki Katainen, whose CV would be very long. He's the president of Sitra, and Sitra is the Finnish Innovation Fund. That's an independent public foundation which operates under the supervision of the Finnish Parliament. And Jyrki actually has been the European Commission Vice President for Jobs, Growth, Investment and Competitiveness. And prior to that, he has been the Prime Minister of Finland and the Finance Minister, and for 15 years has been the member of Finnish Parliament. Quite a track record. Good for you, Jyrki, welcome. And then Peter Wiklöf is the CEO of the Ålandsbanken, and he's been there for as a CEO since 2008. And Peter has got a really impressive career as a banker, joining Ålandsbanken already since 1992. World was pretty different at the time. And he has also been CEO of the daughter company, Proski Banking Solutions. So welcome to you, Peter, too.
And here in Stockholm is Fredrik Ekström, who has a very long and impressive career in the financial industry, especially within clearing. And you have been with Nasdaq for over a decade, and you have held a lot of senior positions, amongst them President Nasdaq Clearing and head of Nasdaq Nordic Fixed Income Exchange. And you have been instrumental also in developing the green bond market, and we will hear more about that later.
So, new forms of investments. The financial service sector will definitely play a crucial role in the climate action. So now I'm turning to Timo. You must have an interesting story to tell us, haven't you?
Thank you, Kaius. Good afternoon, everyone. What is inspiring me in the current development? It's definitely the speed of the positive change. And I really think that the financial industry will play a crucial role in the development to mitigate climate change. And I think that the global financial industry can have even more important role in this development as the governments or political decision makers can have. What is the reason for that? It's a question about where money flows. For example, in 2020, money flows globally into environmental, social, and governance, so-called ESG funds, were 3 to 4 times more as they were 1 year earlier. And it's easy to say that Europe is the global leader in this field. In Europe, ESG funds hit a record with 1.1 trillion euros assets under management at the end of the last year. And despite the pandemic, sustainable debt hit globally another record in 2020 with $732 billion issued, an increase by 29%. Sustainability and social bonds had a strong growth, while green bonds volumes rose by 13% to a record more than $300 billion in the last year. All this expansion, plus further progress on regulation and standards, means that the market is now a teenager rather than a child. Still, plenty remains to be done to drive future growth. Large corporates such as Apple and asset managers such as Fidelity International or Legal and General Investment Management have committed to net zero targets. These go hand in hand as asset managers need investee companies to become carbon neutral to deliver their own promises. We have seen similar development also in Finland. There are more and more companies who are issuing green bonds, and Finnish large corporates have more and more revolving credit facilities with terms including as well as ESG criteria like carbon efficiency, targets to reduce CO2 emissions, or the reduction of specific carbon consumption. I really believe that the financial industry, of course, including OP Financial Group as the leading arranger for green bonds in Finland, will have a very important role in the development to mitigate climate change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Timo. So how about you, Fredrik?
So I first of all, I thank you for inviting me and thank you for hosting this event. I agree with the previous speaker. ESG is on an incredible journey and the development is very fast moving. I think we can claim that we in the Nordic has been pioneers in the ESG space, but also that actually the world is catching up, and belonging to a global organization, I can see how much emphasis and engagement is growing in the US around ESG as such. But I do think, as I said, that the Nordic region has been pioneer in some of the solutions that are being replicated around the world. The green bond market, as we talked about, what is a sustainable bond? A sustainable bond is earmarked capital raising that goes to a transformation into more sustainable business, green projects as such. The green bond market was partly initiated in Sweden in 2009 when SEB and World Bank created a green bond. That was then followed by Vasakronan as the first company and the city of Gothenburg as the first city to issue a green bond. In 2015, Nasdaq Stockholm launched the first marketplace for sustainable bonds. A sustainable bond is really green bonds, social bonds, and other type of sustainable bonds. At that point in time, it was a local Swedish market, size of about 7.5 billion. But now it has grown to a Nordic market in Finland, in Denmark, in Sweden, but also in the Baltics, and with a value of around 275 billion. And what's really encouraging is to see that of the listed corporate bond we have in the Nordic, almost 25% of the listed bond today are sustainable bonds. If you compare that to a global context, it's only about 1% in the global context. Within Nasdaq, when this was launched in 2015, I would say that ESG was maybe not so high on the agenda in the US, maybe much more here in the Nordics, but things are changing. And this idea about sustainable bonds, what was the next step within sustainable bond is really to create more transparency. And we started to think about an idea of creating a global platform around transparency for sustainable bond data. And that was the idea that led to that last year we launched the Nasdaq Sustainable Bond Network, which is a global platform for sustainable bond data to create more transparency. Transparency is important to avoid greenwashing, but also provide investors with impact data. Launched in 2019, now 1.5 years into it, we have over 4,500 bonds from 35 countries on that global platform. And as I said, transparency is important from a greenwashing perspective, but it also creates some valuable data point in what actually this transformation means. We pulled out data from the Sustainable Bond platform in 2020 and could see that the total savings in CO2 emissions from all the green projects that was invested in from the money raised in the sustainable bonds actually was equivalent to a 1-year consumption of the whole city of Stockholm. So this is tangible, and this is super important. To reallocate capital into sustainable investment is critical for this journey to continue. And I want to end with with this sort of final note, and that is really that we have been pioneer in the Nordics, but I think the world is catching up. And if we want to continue to be pioneer in the sustainable space, we have to work really hard and continue to develop our market and drive this change forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Fredrik. So how about you, Jyrki?
Thank you very much, Kaius and Maria. I feel privileged to be part of this very distinguished panel. As we all know, the challenge of our time can be described as threefold. First of all, overconsumption of natural resources, climate change, and biodiversity loss. This climate angle or climate dimension is quite well known, and it's being taken into account in all the businesses, including financial markets already. But the biodiversity loss, it's known, but it comes some 10 years behind climate action. But there's an urgency with this issue. Globally thinking, some 24% of all known species are threatened. In Finland's case, it's about 12%. So I believe that within the next 5 years, biodiversity becomes the same or similar type of issue as climate change is today. And this means that there's an urgency to create market-based approaches to address biodiversity loss. Because if we don't manage to do this, then the growth, which I still believe we need economic growth, is unsustainable. So there's a need for market-based solutions and ways to address biodiversity. As we are around the campfire, I'd like to share with you a story. This is a very simple story. It's a project to which my organization Sitra participated as a financier. It was run by Baltic Sea Action Group and Finland's Meteorological Institute, and it involved 100 farmers. So the farmers changed their cultivation methods. For instance, they plowed soil less than they normally do. And it led to this situation where the composition of soil became richer. In other words, the number of organisms and animals grew. And as a result of this, grass roots became longer and thicker, and the soil absorbed more coal. So in other words, soil became better carbon sink. And furthermore, as a byproduct, farmers got better harvest. So as you can hear, this is not about rocket science. It's a very simple story, but it tells about about a classic economic sector, agriculture, which is capable by changing the way it operates to address at the same time biodiversity loss, climate change, and even reap economic benefits. So there are much more sophisticated examples already in the market. For instance, one well-known forest industrial giant has connected its financing partially to the biodiversity targets. In other words, its interest rates are lower if they meet the targets they have set. So I will stop by saying that biodiversity issue is going to be a big issue in next 5 to 10 years, and it will challenge the economy. And I'm quite optimistic that if we put all our heads together, we can find economic-based, market-based technologies and solutions to address biodiversity loss.
Many thanks, Jyrki. So actually, green bonds are mentioned, avoiding green washing, and now biodiversity questions. How about you, Fredrik? What do you have in mind? Oh, Peter, sorry.
Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kaius. I think I share one story about the journey that I've been involved in over the last 5 years. In our bank, we started more than 20 years ago to work together with our customers to do projects that took responsibility for primarily the Baltic Sea. Of course, being on Åland Islands, we are depending on the water around us. But in 2016, we decided to take the next step, and we figured out that Swedes, the average Swede and the average Finn actually produces approximately 10 tons of carbon dioxide from their daily consumption. And we thought that since being a bank and we're giving out cards, we know where our customers are spending their money. So we could actually do something about that and to raise awareness. So we joined with partners like Analytics, KPMG, MasterCard, and our Standard & Poor's joined, and we started to calculate on that carbon footprint from our customers. And so we every transaction you actually do as a customer, we online show the carbon footprint from that in your mobile phone or internet bank. And we got tremendously good feedback on that, and we saw that, of course, being a bank of our size with a bit more than 100,000 customers, we can't really change the world. So we said that we are giving away this technology for free, and we will make sure that could we actually raise awareness, because this is what it's all about. I think that most people actually are quite decent, but being a human being, that also means that most of us are quite lazy. So if it's difficult to understand, then we do it tomorrow. If it's easy, then we do it today. And in 2017, we call it Åland Index, the way we measure it. We became the first Finnish company to win the biggest marketing and communication competition in the world in Cannes Lion. 40,000 applications that year, and we came out as the winner. And we said, now really we think that other banks will join. But 1.5 years later, I was a bit frustrated because we haven't been able to give it away to one single bank. And I met up with a couple of entrepreneurs in Stockholm, told them about my dilemma, and they said that we want really to do something. And these guys went home and they came back to me 2 months later and said, Peter, this is what we should do. We should actually, since economy seems to actually destroy the world, let's create the economy. Let's make everybody doers with everyday climate action. And we will start to sell these things because we very strongly believe. And today, 2.5 years later, the economy has been now 2.5 years. We now have banks, we have energy companies, we have telcos with a customer base of 250 million customers actually signed on to use Åland Index and to raise awareness. If I come back and just figure with what is the conclusion from this, it could be a couple of things. I think that one could be actually that probably I am the worst salesman in the world because I wasn't able to sell something good for free. But that was also 5 years ago, and time has changed. The other one is that if you get something for free, is it actually any value of it? Or is it better if you are paid for something? And now we have more demand in the economy than we can deliver, so we are out there and taking in capital to actually increase the way we can deliver it. And we see huge demand from the investors to come and join our forces. And that is actually maybe the last conclusion that I had, that for years I've said that from a sustainability perspective, it's actually the women in the world that do the hard work, and we men, we will join when we understand where the money is going. And this is just what makes me hopeful, because when I see now, I see the time has come when also the men understands where the money is going. So we are in a good position.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Well, that was interesting. We have a kind of an issue with your voice, so actually Erik is trying to text you. So just to let you know, we can hear you, but a little bit with a little bit of echo. But Maria, go ahead.
Yes, thanks. Super interesting intros and stories around this fireplace. And I would like to follow up with you, Fredrik. You've been on this journey with the green and sustainable bond market, as you explained. What's next? because you were actually telling a story about the past, and this is the Hannaholmen Future Forum. So what will happen next if you look in your crystal ball?
Well, I do think that green bonds will continue to play a very important role. It's a market that's going to grow significant because we still need a lot of funding. But I think one element of the future is that companies will raise capital to do those investments, to do this sustainable transformation. But even in doing so, even in changing to renewable energy or sustainable sources of production, there will still be a carbon footprint out there. It's impossible to take away everything. And many of my panelist speaker here has mentioned that sort of the carbon footprint and the targets from corporates to really manage that carbon footprint. And I think the next step is really real solutions around how to manage your carbon footprint through carbon offset market. And in the carbon offset market, I think there's going to be focus on the more high quality type of offset that has real environmental impact. So I think funding and green bond will continue to grow, but the management of the footprint, that's where we're going to see a lot of action, I think, and hope.
And who is in the driver's seat here? Because you talked about the world catching up when you talked about the journey with the green bond market and sort of the Nordics playing a leading role. But who is in the driver's seat now? Is it the financial institutions, the companies, or even the regulators?
It's a mix. I mean, so far, I would say that the ESG journey has been very corporate driven, very financial market driven, very innovative. Of course, now EU comes with its Green Deal, the EU taxonomy, so regulation is catching up. I do believe that the driver is still going to be new technology. And we see a lot of companies growing into this, what we call clean tech technology type of companies. So we're going to need new technologies to do this journey, but also with the regulators coming in, and we need to create more sort of, I would say, standardization, more taxonomy. And to do that, we need more data. So I would say that the driver is going to be on all levels and in all regions. This is really a global challenge we have.
I would be curious to hear actually all of you speak a little bit about sort of resistance to change, because it's easy to talk about change after it has happened, but what kind of resistance have you seen so far in this transformation, and what do you expect going forward? If you want to start, Fredrik, and then maybe someone else can jump in.
As I said, I think a key element is that there is a little bit lack of data right now. I think for the industry, for investors, for regulators, for the companies themselves to drive this, I think for this change to keep the momentum, we need more reliable data, and we need more comparable data. So that is, if I was to say one thing, I think we need more comparable data.
Timo here. Yes, I can continue here. I'm thinking same way as Fredrik pointed out, and it's a question about data. Can you trust this data? Is this data available? It's very important from investors' point of view. Also, it's very important from bankers' point of view, and probably this is the biggest challenge. But I see more opportunities as challenges in this development. If I look at the next years and next coming years and the development in this field.
Peter.
Yeah, I think that data, of course, is important, but maybe giving some standardizations and those things that so it's easier to compare different kinds. But still, the overall, if you look at investments, it's not really all about data. It's also using common sense and doing things that you actually feel is good, and is doing the things that you are talking about. And from an investment perspective, I don't think it's ever been a better place to do investments than it is today. And you may see central banks just throwing away money, so money is for free, and there are how much there is as much as you can spend, and you are in negative interest rates, so it actually costs nothing. So if you don't invest in that kind of environment, when should you invest? If I look at the banks and the financial industry, and Timo can surely comment more on that, but the financial industry, when I talk to colleagues, I see an industry that is quite tired. And since 2008, we have been getting regulations after regulations after regulations on us. And now, the 10th of March, the first regulation on sustainability came on us. And I do think, if I go back to 2008 and those that banks were undercapitalized and all those things there, so there were definitely much thing to do. But if I see what is actually now tying up our IT resources and those things, it's not doing the good things for the customer. It's actually just handling regulations, and some of those things could be a bit afraid of that, doing the things that the regulator and all we think is good, coming in with that kind of regulations that we have seen after 2008, but now on the sustainability area, then it could be quite frightening actually from our industry, because it's a tired industry, and resources are tied up already with those regulations that are there.
Maria, you asked about resistance. If I could add one dimension, it's a political dimension. Sometimes when we are listening to public debate around the climate change or sustainability, I got a feeling that significant part of the society is quite skeptical whether we should be a front runner or forerunner in this development, or should we just wait when technology is ready enough and then buy the new technology or invest in new technologies when they are cheaper. So people, general public, sometimes is more skeptical than business itself, and this worries me a little bit, because business seems to live much more in reality than so-called general public. If you look at whatever listed company and look at the strategies or what they say in public or what they have been doing during the last few years, they have been addressing climate change or adapting to it, and they try to reduce the footprint, carbon footprint, etc. So in that sense, I believe that good corporate company examples are desperately needed. And they are also needed when we move forward to address the biodiversity loss.
I can hear a positive sound, in Jyrki's talk about companies, and just to continue a little bit what Maria was saying, that like I'm asking, when talking about matured companies, are they really able to get best out of this current, wave of change, and how to sort of like really avoid, the superficiality of this greenwashing Fredrik was actually mentioning in his speech? What do you think? Does Peter has something? Yeah.
Peter, you are muted.
Yeah, it's for sure that we can see greenwashing in that way, that we see companies maybe promising more than they can deliver on that. So, and that of course I understand that we need some kind of standard on that side. I think that if I look at being on the Åland Islands, we usually say that it's very good. We can look west and we can look east, and we can see that. I would say that Sweden is maybe 3 to 5 years ahead of Finland when I look at awareness about ordinary customers regarding sustainability. So, but Finland is following up, and I think the demand and demand from the customer is quite high, and also, if you look at banking, what is banking about? It's about trust. So, do you trust me? I can do a lot of you. If you don't trust me, I'm out. And that is one of those things that if you actually cheat in front of your customers, you will be held responsible in the future on that side. So I think that is also a quite good demand, because it's becoming easier and easier to change bank. And that is, from that perspective, it's a good situation, because if you don't behave, you will be punished, not by the regulator, but just by the customer. And that is, in many ways, a stronger punishment than just being some fees from the regulator.
So whip. How about Timo? What do you say? Hold on a second, Timo. We are just turning the mute off within a second, so we can. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Now we can hear you. Thanks.
I would like to point out some drivers to this, let's say, positive development. And one is, of course, that already for the last 10 years, foreigners among institutional investors, they have integrated this kind of ESG issues into their investment strategies. And if I look at the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, or 2 or 3 years, I see the same development among banks. And it's coming also some way from regulation, step by step, but also banks are started to integrate these kind of things to their risk policies and credit analysis and so on. And it has a positive impact that we will see more and more companies who are taking these issues very seriously without any greenwashing. And that's really important to understand. And ECB is supervising nowadays 115 banks in Europe. And Andrea Enria, who is heading this supervisory mechanism, he sent a letter 2 months ago to CEOs of those 115 banks and asked that we have to make this kind of self-assessment, how we are taking this kind of climate, for example, climate risks into our credit policy and credit analysis and credit decision making and things like that. And it means that at least in the next year, it will be so that the largest banks in Europe, they are more and more integrated this kind of issues into their strategy and into their risk policy and so on.
Well, turning to Maria, I'm just picking up a couple of notes, from the message wall. Rica Haxelius Fonsen just wrote that emission fees are important topic for future, but easily politicized, and we can learn something from East. The Chinese model would be an equal model in Europe as well, and there everyone pays equally about all emissions without permit values and favor specific industries or companies. Then also there's a question from Mika Taipalus. Are you as bankers able to provide clean financing for clean tech industry a bit same way as energy companies are selling fossil-free electricity to customers? What do you think?
Clean funding.
I'm no banker, I'm an exchange, so sort of heading up the exchange in Stockholm. I will not answer that question directly, but maybe a little bit sidetrack into that is, of course, that I think we need to have a framework where we continue to stimulate capital raising for sort of growth companies, smaller mid-sized company that have tech solutions around how to do this transformation into more renewable energy, managing sort of new type of production facilities that are more carbon neutral, maybe even carbon negative. And there's not only one responsibility, I would say, to make sure that there is capital flowing into this. It's part of the whole ecosystem with bank funding, with exchange, with sustainable bonds, private equity. And I do think as long as we don't put in too much of roadblocks and actually continue to allow capital to flow and maybe even stimulate that, I think we're going to see more companies coming out with solutions. And it is very important that we do get a combination of different funding sources, public and private.
I would like to add one thing, that also banks, we are using green bonds in our funding. It's our funding vehicle as well. And when we are making this kind of funding, we have to give credits to very sustainable investments to corporates, and that's the way to handle this issue.
So the question would be that, you know, a little bit more regional. Do you think, you know, that what would be the biggest competitive advantages, you know, for the Nordics in this field of new forms of investments? Fredrik actually mentioned that, you know, we have a quite good track record already, but you know, what are the real advantages you would find, you know, specifically? Timo, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that one very important issue is that we have this kind of Nordic values. This is more part of our society than in some other societies, and it's very good competitive advantage to us in this area. And as Fredrik pointed out, we have been a pioneer in this development. It's easier to continue on this track, and it as well gives us some kind of competitive advantage also in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone wants to speak. Peter.
I can add to that, because if you look at the Nordic landscape, of course, we have an economy that is compared to many other countries, it's very good, and our finances are strong. We do have well-educated people in our company. We have people that know IT, and maybe if I compare, in Sweden you have good entrepreneurs that understand how to communicate to consumers. We are a bit we don't have that much in Finland, I must admit, but we are catching up, and we are trying to steal from Sweden as much as we can. So I think that the landscape, and also if you look at money, there are entrepreneurs. There are a lot of entrepreneurs that are interested to invest quite a lot of their, I would say, their old money into new businesses and do more things, because we have a lot of good examples already in both Sweden and Finland, and that is actually giving a good taste in the mouth. So there's a lot of people that actually want to try to see can they do it also.
There is also a comment, you know, that what can you learn from Costa Rica? Much more forerunner than the Nordics, you know.
Jyrki, you wanted to come in. What can we learn from Costa Rica?
Actually, I don't know. I know quite many countries, also outside Europe, who have done something, especially in the fields of circular economy. But Costa Rica, I don't know. But I'd like to add one thing, or actually two things, to what the other gentleman has already said. I would say that one of our advantage is well-capitalized banks. So it's obviously basic for all doings. Our banks are well capitalized. I don't know any Nordic zombie bank. But then another point is that Nordic countries are highly industrialized countries, and we have lived in, or our business model is a combination of welfare society and global competitiveness. So our borders have been, economic borders have always been open. So we have got used to compete globally. And as we are industrial countries, which are right at the moment adapting to the new economic reality, which is, for instance, changing their business models to circular economy business models. So classic and traditional industry is a driver of change. At the same time, when there are a number of new businesses, startups, etc., coming to the business, but our kind of fundament is that traditional industry is a driver of change, because they see that the growth will come from sustainability, from circular economy, etc.
I think the Costa Rica comment is actually very smart, because, you know, if we would have the same discussion in Costa Rica, we would ask we do not exactly know what the Nordics are all about, and they might think, and they probably think themselves as pioneers as well. So Fredrik, when looking at it from Nasdaq perspective, do you think that we can really make a change as a Nordic country or Nordic entity, or do other countries really listen to us and benchmark us, or is that something we just feel proud about without really a significant impact?
Well, I think we have had impact on the ESG space. If I look inside out from sort of Nasdaq perspective, many of the Nasdaq solution that is offered globally today has its origin here in the Nordics. I also think that the Nordic region ESG, we talk a lot about the E in ESG now, the climate part, but you have the social part and the corporate governance part, and which is equally important to create a strong ESG offering. And I think the Nordics are strong here, and I think actually that sort of we have had an impact on sort of the ESG development in Europe as such. But I also, coming back to what I said in my sort of campfire story, that I do see that others are running very, very fast. And don't forget that the largest issuer of green bond in the world today is US. And US is a super fragmented country when it comes to climate and driving things, but there's also a massive engine. And so I think coming back to that, we have been pioneer, but that's just for the moment. You need to work as hard tomorrow as we did yesterday to continue to be pioneers.
And from a pure financial industry perspective, then, we talked in the first session about next generation of business. It was a lot of focus on innovation, and your industry has faced a lot of regulation. And there is, of course, a sort of dynamic between compliance to regulations and innovation. But what can the financial industry as such do to sort of be on its toes and be innovative?
Well, I think you're right. There is to strike that right balance between creating standards, regulation that create trust, which will continue to allow capital to flow into it, with the risk of what Peter mentioned of over-regulation that will stop innovation. So that is a balance act, and I'm not envying the politicians to find that right balance. But the financial industry is instrumental. As I said, the most important thing is the allocation of capital into sustainable projects, investment, and business, and that's where the financial market can play a really important role.
Mm-hmm. Thanks to Emilia Runeberg, we had a commentary of through the United Nations environmental project that Costa Rica's environmental credentials are impressive. More than 98% of its energy is renewable. Forest cover now stands at more than 53% after painstaking work, reverse decades of deforestation and so forth. Oh, that's a good note. Thank you very much indeed. Anything else will come at the campfire session, from our distinguished guest. Do you want to comment on any specifics, at this point? Peter has got this final word.
Well, thank you for that. But it's when I listened to Jyrki, and that if I look at the business model in financial sector, it used to be that you want to have 100% of the customer wallet. And that is a business model that is going to die, and what the future is about partnerships. And one of those things that Ålandsbanken, we are a part of a small bank community that when we are lobbying, also trying to make regulations also take some care of small banks and not only big banks. But one of those things is that doing the renewal, doing the next step is actually then doing fintechs, doing other companies. But being a bank, you are quite high penalized if you take on equity from another company on your balance sheet. And that is one of those things that should be considered when the new regulations is coming in, that actually how much capital should actually be tied up in the banks to do those good things that actually push us to do the next generation of financial services and improve both from a sustainability and other perspective the future of the financial services. I think there are things that we can do together if we just let us work with those partners that we are able to find.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's a great final comment, saying that, no more gimme a wallet attitude. So thank you very much indeed for our great panel, second panel.